There we go. Hello and welcome to everyone who has just made their way in from the waiting room and everybody who is watching this recording back at a later date. Today we are talking all around measuring digital success and all around how to measure your digital content. So we'll be looking at your analytics, your digital data, how you can use that data and turn it into insights to inform your strategy, how to report on those insights, every step of the journey. So let's take a look at our agenda for today, which should be on your screens now. So firstly, we'll talk through some learning outcomes and do our normal introductions. Then we'll get started by looking at why data is so important, specifically to nonprofits like yours. And we'll look at what sort of data you can collect, thinking about your different online channels and your communications and fundraising. We'll then discuss which metrics really matter when you're trying to reflect on your online activities. We'll have a demonstration on some different data sources you can collect from some really common digital channels that I'm sure many of you are using. We'll also talk about reporting, so really what to do with the stats once you have collected with them. We'll look at how you can package them up into a report, how you can analyse them so they make sense, so you can use that data to inform your future content, your future communications. We'll make sure to save time for any questions you may have, and like I mentioned earlier, do submit those in the Q&A throughout the session, and we'll make sure to answer those at the end. But like I say, don't have to save your questions until the end. You can pop them in the Q&A and we can answer them throughout. Or if you'd like to just share reflections, come off mute, do raise your Zoom hand. We always love hearing from you. So I think that is our agenda for today. Let's go through our introductions. So I know many of you know me, but if you do not, my name is Sabina and I am one of your digital communication coaches here on the team at Lightfall to help you throughout your bridge journey with these live sessions and in your one-to-one coaching and by developing your e-learning content on Lightfall Academy. My background is in the nonprofit sector. I worked for 12 years at a conservation charity in the UK, working on roles covering social media, website optimization, marketing, campaigning, both on and offline. What's been really important in all of those roles is really understanding the data points and analysing them to make improved communications and strategies off the back of those. So diving into the data really felt very daunting to me when I first started, but it soon became one of the things that actually I found the most satisfying and rewarding because it gave me some really actionable insights that helped me to make informed choices. So looking forward to sharing my learnings with you all. It's not just me on the call today, I'm also joined by my brilliant colleague Jasmine, so I will hand over to her to introduce herself.
Thanks, Sabina. Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. It's great to see everyone back ready for 2025. I know I've also met lots of you already, but just as a reminder or for anyone I haven't yet met, my name is Jasmine and I'm digital training lead on the Bridge team here at Lightfall, where like the rest of the coaches, I get to support all of you with your digital journeys, helping you with your digital strategies and really to get the most out of the Bridge programme. And my background is specifically in digital marketing, social media. I spent some time working as a digital analyst as well, so big fan of how to best use and understand digital data. And I was just thinking, oh, it feels like quite a heavy topic to start the year with, but I do think it's very, very useful. And hopefully if you were running any end of year campaigns, then actually now's the perfect time to be looking back at your data, setting goals for the year ahead. And so hopefully a well-timed session for those of you who are doing that and really help you to get motivated for the year ahead. So let's look at our learning objectives for today's session. So firstly, we'd like you all to understand the importance of data to help measure digital success and measure your progress, and really using that data to inform your strategy and the future goals that you set. And our second learning objective is to help you identify key metrics that relate to your digital goals. So understanding what data can be collected on each platform and also what data you should spend time collecting, because there is a lot out there. So really thinking about what aligns best to your goals, whether that's to increase fundraising, increase your reach online, or build a more engaged community on social media. We'll look at all those different metrics that you can access and track to get a better understanding of how you're meeting those goals. And then we'll also help you understand how you can turn data into insights to inform your strategy and decision-making process and gain confidence in presenting and reporting on that data. It's one thing to collect the data and store it, but it's much more valuable to use that data, to understand it, and then use that to inform your strategy, future decisions, your content as well, everything that you do online, and helping you become more confident in using that. So that's what we'd like you to get out of the session today. But just to begin with, we're going to have a bit of a think about what we mean when we talk about data. So when we're talking about data, it can be any kind of raw information. So it might be text, numbers, images, audio, video, anything that you collect from individuals or organizations. And it can start with something simple. So thinking about something quite day-to-day like supporter data or donor data, that might be simply someone's name and email address. That gives you some basic details and insight into who they are and how you can contact them. And to understand a bit more about your audience, you might then collect data such as people's ages, their employment, their interests, whether they're working or studying, to help you understand a bit more about their behaviours. And this insight will then help you to understand more about what they would like to see from you and how to reach them. And we talked about that when we looked at personas, which was quite a few months ago now, but hopefully that rings some bells there. And to understand how they like to consume and digest information and their longer term interests, you might want to collect data about their online engagement or their donation history with your organisation. So having access to some information about any additional gifts that they give, how much they give to your organisation throughout the year, whether they attend events, they might engage with your content online, do they open your emails, are they really active on your social media pages? So that gives you a bit more detailed understanding of those audiences. But your data collection doesn't need to be limited to kind of audience characteristics. It's really helpful to collect data across lots of different areas, such as your campaign activity. Maybe it's even to do with staff and volunteer management and productivity, and of course, social media engagement, which I've spent many hours and days in the past collecting data on, which I find super helpful. And there are lots of different data points that you can get information about your donors and supporters, starting with that basic side of things and then getting more detailed and then identifying like ongoing data points that you can track to get a better understanding of the types of individuals that will support and engage your organisation. But what's really important to remember is that all of this data might not really mean anything on its own and in isolation. It's when you put it all together that you can really identify common trends, and that's what we call insights or data-backed insights. So you'll have a better understanding of your audience. You might be able to begin to predict the behaviour of your donors or supporters, but really to put that all together to create an improved and more effective digital strategy with an understanding of the types of content you should be creating and what channels you should be on, how you can campaign on certain issues, the best way to fundraise amongst your audiences, and the way that you see yourself getting results. So putting that all together to get those insights. And then before we go into more detail on that, I'd love to know a little bit about the sorts of data that everyone uses for those of you on the call today. So what does data mean in your roles or in your organisations? So if we pull up our Slido, you should hopefully be able to see on your screen a QR code. So if you grab your phone, you can scan the QR code and just type in anything that comes to mind. So what data do you currently track, measure, or use? It might be something like how many followers you have on your Instagram page, or it might be how much money you raised at a recent campaign. I'll give everyone a few moments to have a think. And if you can't use the Slido, if you don't have your phone handy, then you can post in the chat. That's no problem as well. Or if you've got a slightly interesting way of using data, if there's anything you'd like to share with us, then feel free to raise your hand and come off of mute as well. I'll give everyone a few moments to get typing, and hopefully we'll have a bit of a list of the sorts of data that you already collect. So we've got social media engagements to start with. So that might be the number of likes on your posts. It might be if someone's commented. It might be how many people are sharing your posts as well. So you can kind of look at engagements overall, but then go into a bit more detail of that too. And so we've got some people typing away. Great. So one that's just come through, response rates and open rates for emails or newsletters. Yeah, that's a really important one. The open rates giving you a great indicator of the very first thing of if someone's opened your email. I feel like that's such a big hurdle to get over, and actually that's kind of the first thing you want to be checking on your emails. But also response rate, I think, is a really interesting one. If you've got a good response rate, then that is a really high type of engagement. I think about the sort of high value engagements like on social media. If someone actually takes the time to comment on a post, I see that as a bit more valuable than if they just like it. And similar to emails, they might open it, but if they actually click on stuff, if they take action, if they then reply, that's really, really key. Another one of email newsletter opens and clicks, website users, page views, engagement time, social media engagements, loads of stuff in there. That's brilliant. And yeah, there's lots of data you can get on your websites, which we'll talk about in more detail. But that kind of page views at a glance, I find, particularly if I look in Google Analytics and I see all my different pages listed, the ones with the top views. I was actually doing a report using that just last week, and I found it quite surprising of the pages I thought would be listed weren't on there, and that actually gave me some insights as to the sorts of content I should be creating as well. Hope says you use analytics from LinkedIn. That's great. Yeah, you can get some really good data on LinkedIn now, actually, on your posts, but also on the followers and the people that view your page. You can see their industry, you can see the types of companies that they're at too, which is quite helpful for that more corporate engagement. Elise says website analytics. Yeah, absolutely. Loads of data we can get there. Someone's mentioned meta ads analytics as well. That's a really good one because there's all sorts of data on ads, and that can help you then to refine the audience that you're targeting and make sure that you're spending your budget in the most effective way too. Any others we haven't had? All donation amounts, yeah. And actually with donations, you might have your overall amount you've raised, but actually how much are individuals giving? Because if that's a similar amount across the board, that tells you one thing, but actually if your donors are giving wildly different amounts, then I think that can help you think about how you might want to be segmenting your donors too. But loads and loads of data listed there. Thanks everyone for putting your words into that list. That's really helpful to see. It sounds like we've got lots of really confident use of data in some of those areas already. We're going to go through it in more detail, and I'm going to hand over to Sabina to talk us through that. But if you have any particular challenges on your mind of, you're really confident that using email data, but you're not so sure about websites, then drop it in the chat and we can make sure that we focus a bit more on the areas that you might need help on. But thanks everyone, it's great to see that. And I'll hand over to you now, Sabina.
Thanks, Jasmine. And yeah, second, it's really interesting to see how you're all using data already. And it sounds like you're all pretty experienced, but we are going to first of all touch on why data is so important, and how your organization can then start using data in a more strategic and impactful way, perhaps. So before we do go into those metrics, let's ask the question, why is data so important? Well, particularly in the nonprofit sector, it's really important to look at the data that is available to you. Measuring your data and drawing insights from that data provides many benefits. So understanding the data of each of your digital channels is what's going to make your digital presence more meaningful. Data from different sources can be used to build an accurate picture of your organization and your services and your audience, which can then help you to make those smarter choices which are supported by data rather than subjective observations. It shows you what works well and what doesn't work well in terms of your content, which can help you to develop a clear long-term plan and a strategy that you know will drive results. And one of the biggest values is that measurement helps avoid wasting time. You can understand what works and what doesn't, and over time you can improve your outcomes and be more efficient. And data also helps you understand your donors and your supporters and your service users on an individual level and helps you to predict their behaviour, both online and offline. So it's always about using data to inform your decisions and using those data-backed insights to really help to drive results. So it can help you to find what triggers people to take initiatives and donate, or help you understand the best source or the best channels to establish your communications on for your different audience groups, and gauge the level of awareness amongst those different audiences. And if you have a better understanding of your audiences based on the actions that they've taken on your platforms previously, you can then be more tailored with your content and be more efficient and effective with your content. And it also allows you to be much more specific with the messaging and visuals that you share, and even when and where you share them. You can use data to see what times your audience responds best to your content, or even which content they visit the most. So thinking about your website, like Jasmine mentioned, seeing those busy pages can help you to understand whether the information you have on the website is communicated in the right places, or maybe you might need to move it onto the more popular pages. And it also helps you to communicate results internally or to funders. And we can all appreciate how important transparency is. Transparent nonprofits who share data with their stakeholders have a better chance of connecting with donors and raising more funds. because transparency breeds trust, and trust, as we know, is important for any donation or any purchase that you make in your everyday life. So every supporter interaction results in new data. Every visit to your website, every email, every donation, every time somebody engages with a social media post. And this data is all available for you to access, which we saw on that Slido poll that you all are. And once you've accessed this, you can then draw insights and use those insights when shaping your communications and your campaigns, even your in-person events. Data can be quite daunting for many because we have this kind of preconceived idea that data collection needs to be quite a big, tedious task that you can only do by sitting behind a screen all day, every day, going through spreadsheets. But it is really important to say that lots of the platforms that you work on online do a lot of the hard work for you when it comes to collecting that data. So it's really then just down to you to look at that data, identify the trends, and then use that to inform your work. So data analysis is the process of transforming that data into knowledge. So sifting through the information to uncover meaning that can then help you to make those informed strategic decisions. And data analysis can seem a bit intimidating or technical, but you can break it down into 3 stages, which I will bring up on your screens now. So thinking about your metrics and your data. So this is pretty much just the numbers that you track, that raw data that you have access to. And Jasmine will be showing you shortly just some of those metrics you can measure and where to find them. Then we come to the insights. So this is the analysis of those metrics. What do they tell you about your online content? Can you spot any trends or patterns? And then finally, we have application. And this is when you use those insights to improve the impact and effectiveness of your future digital content. So using data-backed insights to make data-informed decisions and presenting that in reports to help aid your nonprofit's transparency. So before we move on to those demonstrations, let's get some data from some of you who are on the call now. I'm going to launch a quick poll asking you, do you currently make use of any analytics? Which I think, judging on that Slido poll we saw before, a lot of you do. But let's get this poll launched for you now so you can vote to let us know. You've got 3 choices there. Yes, we use analytics to inform our strategy. The second one is we check our analytics, but we don't use them to plan. Or the third is no, we don't check or make use of our analytics. So I can see we've already got lots of votes coming in there, which is super useful to see. Thank you. I'll just give you a bit more time to cast your vote if you haven't yet done so. But so far, it's looking like the majority of people on the call do use your analytics to inform your strategy, which is so good to see. And some of you are not yet using them to plan, but hopefully by the end of today's session, you will have an idea of how you can do so, and that kind of blocker might be taken out of your way. So I think almost everyone's voted, so I'll just leave that live while we move on to our next section of today's webinar, and let me hand over to Jasmine to take you through that.
Great, thanks Sabina. So yeah, we're going to look now at those specific metrics that you might want to be tracking for different platforms. Like we mentioned, all of those different platforms provide unique insights for you to be able to track engagement. And there are lots of data sets that you can track. It sounds like lots of you are already tracking them. So hopefully what we'll do now is go through each of those channels and have almost a bit of a checklist of the sorts of things you can be monitoring, and maybe a good point for you to be able to pull out anything that maybe you haven't looked at yet, or anything you'd like to look at after today's session that might be new. But like I said, if you pop in the chat, if there's anything that you struggle to access or to get your head around, then let us know and we can spend more time on those areas. And actually, when it comes to linking your data to your goals and your strategy, it's really important to start off by thinking about your goals. Sometimes that initial question of kind of what to measure, how often to look at the data, can be quite challenging. It's something that a lot of people ask us because, you know, there's lots of data available, but you really don't want to be spending all your time looking at the data. You've got lots of other things to be doing as well. But we always say to start with your goals, and that's why we talk about SMART goals so very often. And the SMART goals, remember, they stand for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So these SMART goals, one of that key things there is to make it measurable. So that's to include a metric, and to make it timely means that it includes a deadline. So those 2 elements of your goals give you a really good place to start when it comes to understanding what data to analyze, how often to measure it, and even, you know, how often to report on it as well. So if we have an example goal, you might have said you want to increase the amount raised through our website's donation page by 10% by the end of the year. So for that SMART goal, we know that we need to measure donations received through the donation page. So that means we want to know how many donations there are, have that baseline to track now, so how many donations are currently coming through, to then be able to track against whether we've increased that by 10%. And the goal is to hit that number by the end of the year. I know at the start of the year now, but I would advise checking progress, maybe monthly. Like, definitely don't wait until the deadline and just get a surprise and see, did we meet it? Did we not meet it? You know, having those checkpoints helps you to know what's helping you to be on track. And if you're not on track, then are there any blockers and anything that you need to be changing there? And where to find that data, we'll talk about in a moment. And we're going to run through some of those common metrics to track. But if you had that goal of tracking your donations, then that main thing is looking at the number of donations coming through that page. But there might be some other metrics that would give you clues as to knowing anything else you might want to change too. So you might notice that donations go up and down over a period. I'm sure that's the case for your pages, but that's when you want to look at page views, like somebody mentioned earlier, traffic source as well. Where are people coming to from that page? If you notice your donations have spiked, but actually you weren't running a campaign at that time, then look at where those clicks came from, and perhaps they came from a recent newsletter you sent out, or maybe someone's mentioned you on social media, and all of these things add together to give you clues as to knowing whether you're on track to achieve those goals, but also any particular channels that you can really optimize and mobilize to help improve that result as well, to get more people landing on that page. So yeah, think about your goals. It's a great time to think about goals, I think, as we start a new year, and then pick out those metrics and how often you need to check in on those, and look at those, the kind of important ones to understand and utilize. And that also means that you don't get too distracted by all the other metrics that are available. And I think sometimes it's helpful to look outside of your goals and to look at some other insights. But there is a lot out there, so that can really help you streamline it and make you more efficient in what you're reporting on as well. But we'll look at each of the platforms now. So first up, we've got social media channels. So that could be your Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, I saw someone mentioned, YouTube, TikTok, and we can look through some of the metrics that you might want to be tracking now. Somebody already mentioned engagements. Looking at your engagements helps you to really understand what your target audience values the most. So tracking the amount of engagement that your different posts receive, you know if what you're offering is valued by your audience, and then you can know if you need to change it and adapt it. And even if that is something you're tracking, I think that's something that kind of never gets old. It's something I try and do on a monthly basis, of looking back and saying, what am I most engaged with posts? What am I least engaged with posts? And therefore, what does that tell me? So it's really easy to measure your likes, comments, retweets, or shares, and all of the social platforms make that data really readily available now in their internal analytics tools. But it's really good to pinpoint those, maybe once a month, maybe it's once a quarter, and identify those trends. So maybe there's a particular time of day that your audience is most likely to engage. Perhaps there's a type of post that your audience particularly enjoys. So it might be, if you notice, if you post a photo of your team or staff pictures, they often get lots of engagement. But maybe if you post a video, that gets more impressions or more views. And maybe it's the type of content as well. So it might be the kind of nature of it, whether it's a story you're telling, some impact that you're sharing. So really use that data to dig into what it means and what it's telling you, and identify which posts perform better than others. And it also gives you a bit of an insight into your audience too. And that's really important, because you do need to have an engaged following in order to drive traffic from your channels into more valuable areas, such as your fundraising pages and all of those different things that you want them to do. But those are some examples of your social media metrics that you might want to track. And I think, again, somebody has mentioned that they will use Meta. And if you haven't ever used kind of social media analytics tools specifically, the Meta Business Suite is a really helpful place to start. And I'm just going to take the screen share and show you quickly how I do that. So hopefully, can you see the Meta Business Suite? Shared the right page, that's good. So everyone with a business account on Facebook and or Instagram has access to the Meta Business Suite. And once you navigate through the Business Suite, you should see something like this. I always find the homepage actually very overwhelming. They have so many things on it. So I'm just going to point out my favorite places to go and look for data. It does show you some of those key metrics at a glance. If I click on my insights, again, personally find that a bit overwhelming, but it's got a summary of your kind of most recent week and your content overview. But if you look at your audience tab, this is where we talked about before for getting some of those insights into creating your audience personas. Worth noting as well, when you've got Facebook and Instagram, you can toggle between the two to see how that compares across your different channels. So you can see the age, the gender, the locations, and all of these different elements here. And the content overview, here it is. You can change the date range. Some might want to say, look at reporting on a particular quarter, and it will show you kind of views of posts, video views, and then I can split that between my different types of content as well, and look at those. And it will show you which types of posts are most engaging. So you can see that at a glance, which is quite a helpful check-in if you actively are using social media often. I would just check in on that maybe once a week as you're creating your content. And then on the content tab specifically, this is where you can get post-specific metrics, which I find really helpful. If it will load, that would be even more helpful. But what I can do here is adjust the columns so that it shows the metrics that I want to see. And that's what I'd recommend doing in alignment with your SMART goals. So some of the top metrics that I find helpful are to look at post impressions, because that's how many people have seen your post, and then your different types of engagements. But you might say, and as you scroll down, you can see kind of all the different options that are available, which can feel a bit overwhelming, but I might want to say, I want to see video views as well, maybe just the views. Those two. This includes all of the Instagram engagements too, so you can see like sticker taps that's on your stories. So you've got lots of detail there. And I'd recommend you can also rearrange them as well, so it can just really be according to what you want to be tracking. And I change those, and then you kind of got them all there for you. You can filter whether it's posts, stories, types of media, so really helpful for those comparisons. And I really like using the tool here to just look at that data. You can export it as well. You can take it out into a spreadsheet and do even more things with it. But that's, I find, really helpful just to look at kind of an overview of what's available, and really pick those metrics that are going to be most useful for you. And if you are looking for an overview of your social media content across all of your different platforms, then you can, of course, use the Lightful platform. You can take a look at the analytics section on that page with the accounts that you've connected. So you can see your LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter all in one place as well. And doing that comparison, I think, is particularly useful to do. So that's a bit on social media. And the next thing we're going to look at is email marketing. It sounds like quite a few of you are running newsletters, because I know several of you mentioned some of these metrics that are on the screen now. So people have already said you've got your click-through rate. So that's the percentage of email recipients who clicked on one or more links in a given email. This is really, really important because it helps you to easily calculate the performance of every email you send. You can compare across them as well. It gives you a really direct insight into how many people are engaging with your email content. If you've got a low click-through rate, it could be for a number of reasons. People might not be opening your emails. We talked about open rate as well. You might not have really clear call to actions. If you found, for example, that your open rate was high, so lots of people are opening your emails, but your click rate is low, then that suggests that your call to action maybe isn't as clear as it could be. Perhaps you've not got it high enough up in your email, so people aren't scrolling all the way down to get to that. So really think about comparing your click-through rates across your different emails to see that level of engagement across those. And you can also track conversion rates. This is the percentage of email recipients who clicked on a link and completed that desired action. So it might be donated via your donation form, completed a survey, registered for an event, whatever that is. Ideally, of course, we all want everyone to open your email, click on something and take an action. And that conversion rate is a great way to measure whether people are taking those actions as well. Again, it's comparing those things. So if you've got lots of people open it, lots of people click on it, but people don't then complete that action, it's thinking, have you made that case really compelling? Because actually someone's been persuaded to click on the link, maybe open your donation page, but what stopped them from then completing that action would be something that I would look at. And actually a few tips on your open rates. If you notice that your open rates aren't particularly high, think about any barriers someone might have to opening your email in the very first instance. So is it going into spam folders, or is it going straight to their inbox? The information they have to decide whether or not to open it is who it's from and the subject line, and maybe the preview line as well. So those are the areas that you can really look at optimizing and testing different versions as well to do a comparison across different subject lines, different preview lines as well, so that line that appears underneath that. And you can also track bounce rates. So that's the percentage of total emails sent that could not be successfully delivered. So you've got a soft bounce or a hard bounce, and soft bounces mean that the email address was valid, but they might have had a temporary problem. Maybe there's some kind of glitch. If you resend it later, it should hopefully go through. Hard bounces, these are invalid or closed email addresses that don't exist. So I'd recommend that everyone will go through and remove hard bounce email addresses from your email list, because actually internet service providers use bounce rates to determine a sender's reputation. So if you've got a high bounce rate, then you might be more likely to fall into those spam inboxes, and then kind of all of those knock-on effects there. So even if you're checking these analytics regularly, do make sure you do a bit of an audit of those bounces as well. And there's more of a kind of comprehensive list in Lightful Academy, which includes some data-backed insights for better email engagement for nonprofits, and looks at those metrics and some tips on how you can improve some of those rates. So Svetlana's just posted that in the chat if you want to have a look at that in more detail. And depending on your email provider, these data points might look slightly different for you. So let's have a quick look at this example is from a really straightforward tool actually called GMass, which is Google's own plugin for sending mass emails. So it's not kind of a customer database, it's just sending emails. But you can see it's given a table and showing how many people opened the email, how many people didn't, whether people clicked on one or more link. It will then in more depth say which links they clicked, even saying how many people replied, unsubscribed, all those different things. So that's really useful to get those reports, just to have a look and compare across those emails. I would say it's really important as well, just to know what's doing well, similar to like I mentioned with your social media posts. And on the next slide, we've got an example from MailChimp, which is a very popular email provider. And you can see here, it's got more detail in there. You can see some more data points like changes in engagement, which emails perform the best, and you can get reports off of that platform as well. And I'm sure several of you are using particular email providers. If there are any that you find really helpful, then do feel free to let us know in the chat. We're always asked for recommendations from other nonprofits. So if you've got one that you use that you can recommend, then do let us know. And next, we're going to look at websites. So there were some great points on this earlier as well. And one of the most important website metrics to look at is traffic, which is how many people are going to your website. And this gives you a really good idea of your reach with potential donors or whatever the audience is that you're trying to reach. And there are two different types of traffic metrics that would be good to look at. So one is the number of unique first-time visitors. So this is each individual person that's visiting your website. If you saw a growth in first-time visits, of course, that means that you're doing a great job in raising awareness about your organization. More people are coming to your site. That's a really good sign. And then the other one is repeat visitors. And this helps you to look at the strength of your relationships with existing visitors as well. So strong repeat traffic suggests that you've got a committed audience, they're coming back again, and they've got information that's meant that they're going to come back to your site another time. I would think about the content on your website. So if, for example, you have a blog series, or if in your newsletter you link out to latest articles, that would hopefully prompt more repeat traffic, because there's a reason for them to come back, because you keep it updated, there's fresh content on there. So really thinking about what those traffic metrics are telling you about your audiences. And then conversion rates, similar to emails, it's people who take that action, whether that's signing up, donating, whatever it is you want them to do. Another one to point out is 404 errors. That's a good thing to keep an eye on your websites, because this usually occurs if a page has been deleted from the website, or when a page hasn't been renamed or moved, so it's got a different URL and the redirect hasn't been set up. So if you've got lots of broken links and therefore 404 errors, then of course that's not a good experience for your website visitors, but it also indicates to search engines like Google that your website isn't trustworthy, so they're less likely to rank you highly on your search engine pages, which is really important for people discovering your page. In terms of looking at your website analytics, I definitely recommend Google Analytics. This is a free tool which can get all of that website data for you, and you can set up dashboards similar to that Meta example to compare across your different pages or whatever it is you want to be measuring. And finally, the source of your website traffic will be really important as well. So if you see that someone visits through a social media post, then it means, you know, your social media posts are doing a great job of getting people through to your website. Or you might look through and realize that actually no one's visiting your website through an organic search engine like Google. So maybe there's an opportunity for you to develop your SEO, search engine optimization strategy. So looking at any gaps that you have and any opportunities there might be for getting more traffic from your different channels that you have. And actually looking at search engine optimization, Google Search Console is another free tool that's really helpful for looking at your SEO, which I can see Svetlana shared in the chat too. And then in terms of metrics, our last ones here are fundraising. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but the different types of fundraising data you can collect based on what your goals are. But you've got donation volume, so total number of donations. So knowing how many people are donating to a fundraiser or a campaign helps you know how effective your outreach efforts are. Then the total amount donated helps you to be able to compare across your different campaigns. I'm sure, you know, one of the big things we'll all have is financial targets for a campaign, whether that's for a program or project. So you can monitor those. An average donation size I find really interesting because looking at this will help you to understand the giving behavior of your donors and how effective or relevant your donation asks is. So maybe your giving handles during a campaign need to be higher or lower to meet where your audience is at in terms of their gift size. And it also helps you to identify what counts for your organization as a major gift and therefore how you're going to steward that. So looking at those amounts is really important. And also donor retention rate. So percentage of donors who made a donation and continue to donate, helping to understand the loyalty and again, feeding into that donor stewardship strategy, which is really important. So that's lots of different metrics I've kind of thrown out, and hopefully you might have had a few to scribble down that you might like to look into in a little bit more detail. But overall, we're looking at metrics that align with 4 key areas when it comes to your digital content. So you've got awareness, engagement, interest, and conversion. And we're measuring a supporter's relationship journey with your organization. So firstly, you've got awareness. It's people finding out that you exist. So things like your social media impressions, website traffic. Then we've got engagement and interest, people who actually interact and take an action. And then conversions, so people take one of those practical actions that you say. And I find these metrics and kind of aligning them to those 4 different things really helpful in terms of explaining the data to internal stakeholders, to influencing people as well, to actually saying, you know, our social media content might have gained 4,000 impressions, and so actually 4,000 views of this content, and being able to qualify it along this journey, and then thinking, how do we then engage those people and bring them along that journey to then convert and become a donor? So hopefully that data will help you to better understand the performance of your online content, make sure that you're on track to achieve your goals, but also influence your strategy in areas that you might need to improve or invest in as well going forwards. So now we've got those metrics and talked about where you can find those, I'll hand over to Sabina now to talk about insights.
Thanks, Jasmine. Okay, so now we are focusing on what we do once we know about where to find all that brilliant data, how we turn the metrics into that useful information that we then apply to our strategies and our campaigns and our content. So looking for trends in performance is a really key way that you can turn those metrics into insights, and then you can apply those insights into your future content and strategies. So let's break it down into those different platforms which Jasmine demonstrated. So first up, it's social media. So with social media, when you're trying to identify some trends, like Jasmine mentioned earlier, we always recommend taking a regular look at your social media posts, those ones with the most engagements and those ones with the least engagements, and then looking for trends across those posts. So it could be the day or the time that they went live. There could be similarities in the length of the captions, or maybe in the style of the media used, maybe even the call to action that you used. So similarities in themes like these are really indicative of what your audience does and doesn't respond to. And it's also helpful to compare this across your different channels too. So perhaps posts with videos perform best for you on Instagram, and maybe infographics perform best for you on Facebook. And this information can really help you to understand how your different target audiences prefer to consume your content. And it's very different for every single organization. It's also worth looking to see if there's a specific time your audience is most likely to engage, or if there's a specific type of post your audience particularly engages with, so maybe images or videos, but then you can get even more granular. So what type of images? Is it images of your projects, or images of your service users, or images of your consumers? And then by tracking that kind of data, you can also identify which posts perform better than others, which then gives you an insight into your audience and what they're most interested in. When it comes to emails, again, when your content reaches your audience is one data set that can provide really valuable insights into your audiences. So perhaps your data shows that when you're trying to reach one specific audience groups, maybe Sunday evenings see the highest open rates, and then maybe for a different audience, it's Wednesday mornings. No two audiences are the same, so keep your segments and your personas in mind when you are carrying out your data analysis. And then we have open rates and click rates, as Jasmine mentioned, and they're really key to understanding how your emails are performing. And like she said, there are those different elements that contribute to those performances, like your subject lines, your sender names, your length, your calls to actions. So when you're looking at your email performance, again, do look for trends in those different areas. You might find that short and snappy emails see the best open rates, or emails with just one paragraph in the body gets the best click-through rates. So look for those trends and ask "so what" to interrogate that data. Then on your websites, your most popular and least popular pages can help you to understand whether your key information is reaching your intended audiences. If you see spikes in traffic on certain days or certain dates, try and identify what caused those spikes. Perhaps a press release you sent out was picked up, or a social media post was really effective, or you were featured in another organization's blog. And then when it comes to fundraising, time trends can reveal patterns, such as the best times for campaigns or when to re-engage past donors. And as nonprofits that regularly conduct campaigns for fundraisers, you need to consider collecting data regularly, depending on what data you are collecting. And one of the questions we get asked all the time is, how often should you measure the data? So we've got some kind of tips on screen now for some ballpark times you might want to be measuring your data. So weekly is a good time to look at those things that are evolving quickly, like social media. You might want to have a quick look back at the end of the week at how your content has been performing, keep an eye out for any trends, or perhaps something you're trying to share on social media isn't resonating with your audience, but it's a really key message for you. You'll see then that you might want to give it a bit more of a push in the coming weeks. Most general data sets, such as website visits, can be checked a bit more infrequently, so monthly on those. Then to keep a track of any trends and data, you want to monitor your performance across the board quarterly. And any strategic updates based on your actions over the last year can be done annually. But like Jasmine mentioned earlier, your goals are also really key to knowing when to measure and what to measure. So if you've got goals that have got those time-sensitive elements, don't leave it until the date that your goal is due to check in against your metrics. You need to be across them a bit ahead to know whether you're on track and whether there's any additional work you need to do. So I think you have been introduced to the campaign planner tool in the past. So here at Lightful, we did develop this new tool designed for you to use to plan your campaigns, but it's also really useful for once your campaigns are over. It's a place that you can use to capture your data and your insights. We'll post a link to it in the chat, and I'll also show you around it very quickly in just a second. But when you are doing that data evaluation, I would really recommend dropping your learnings into the campaign planner tool, especially at the end of your campaigns, so that you have got that insight captured, so that when you're next running your campaigns, you can look back at how your campaigns performed previously and look at those insights and those learnings and then apply them for your next ones. So let me hop over to the campaign planner, and I'm just going to move my Zoom window a little bit so you can see a bit more. There we go. So you'll find it in the campaigns button just here, and we have recently moved some of the things around on the Lightful platform, so it might not be where you're expecting to find it. So there's a little refresh there. And if you've got a campaign plan that you created earlier on, then you can open it up and head down to the very last section, which is your campaign review section. And here is where you can drop in those learnings from each campaign that you evaluate. So how well you performed against your goals, any challenges, what went well, and what you might want to do differently. If you didn't create a campaign plan to begin with, I would still recommend this as a place you can capture your data and your insights. You can just start a new campaign and skip down to the end and drop that data in, so you've got it saved for you to draw your data from next time. You can then, if you want to, head back to the top and just drop a bit more information in about your campaign, so you've got that context to work from. But hopefully that will be a useful tool for you as you are carrying out your evaluation on your metrics, and then you can save it to reflect on in the future. Just doing a little bit of Zoom window shuffling around so you can see your slides again. There we go. So once you've captured your data, then next step is reporting on it. And reporting and displaying of this data can often be daunting for a lot of people, but there is no need to worry because you can break it down into some manageable steps. So let's take a look at how. So it's really important that after you have analysed the data of your channels or your campaigns and you've captured your data and your insights, to then present your findings in an easy to read and accessible report to highlight those key metrics. And these will help you to analyse the effectiveness of your campaign and identify any areas for improvement. And it will also allow your donors and your supporters to get a deeper insight into how your organisation is using its funds to create impact, which is really essential if you want to maintain their loyalty. So the first thing to consider including in your report is an executive summary. This should provide a brief overview of the campaign, including the goals, the target audience, the key metrics. And this section should be quite concise and highlight the most important insights that you've collected. Then you want to mention your campaign objectives. So this outlines the goals of the campaign, including specific metrics that you were aiming to achieve, such as maybe your donation target or your conversion rate. Then you can showcase the metrics that you've collected throughout, such as those we've been discussing, and explain what they directly and indirectly tell you about performance. And it's also a good idea to include an impact analysis. So this should utilise the impact of the campaign on the organisation and its service users, including how the funds raised will be used and what the outcomes that were achieved. And this can help you to demonstrate the value of the campaign to your stakeholders and build that support for future fundraising efforts. And finally, you want to highlight your next steps as an organisation, so why it is important for your audience to continue their support. And you don't need to have it very data and text heavy. You can break it up for the reader by including graphs and infographics, screenshots or images. One organisation that we often talk about when advising nonprofits on creating their annual or biannual or campaign reports is Dogs Trust. And this is a UK-based charity raising funds to support abandoned dogs. And we can pop a link into the chat, and this link will take you to their annual reports. I always find it's useful to see how other organisations are creating their reports, and still with pride. So if you scroll down past their executive summary to the bottom of their page, you will be able to see that you can download their in-depth report. And I would definitely recommend having a look at this. And the reason is why is that the information they include is all really useful and really transparent. You can see that they include data on how funds are raised, where funds are donated from, and how they choose to spend those funds. And they're really honest, which helps their donors retain loyalty to the organisation. You can also see some other examples of nonprofit impact reports, as well as a step-by-step guide on how to create an impact report in a downloadable guide that we've created, which I can see Svetlana has just posted in the chat for you. So we would recommend having a look at that too. So let's take a look now at some actions we'd recommend taking after today's session. Here they are coming up on your screens now. So firstly, you can deepen your knowledge on everything we've been talking about today. We've got a playlist on Lightful Academy, which has got some really useful micro-learning courses on. Just 3 in this playlist. One is on how to measure digital success. One is all around how to create an impact report. And the other is an introduction to analytics. So each of those is bite-sized, not too overwhelming, but really takes you through a step-by-step guide into each of those different areas. Then I would recommend using your new analytics skills and putting them into practice. So as your campaigns are coming to an end, I know many of you were running year-end campaigns last year, do look at the data from your campaign content and capture it using the campaign planner so that when you're next running your campaigns, you can look back on your learnings and apply them. You can also download our impact report guide, which I know we've just shared for you in the chat. And I would also recommend booking a one-to-one so we can look together at your data and we can help you with any particular challenges that you're facing. And now, drumroll please, it is time to introduce you to our Bright Sparks Society, which is our alumni community. And we'll be sharing more information with you about this over the next few weeks, but I wanted to let you all know what it is and how you can get involved. So the Bright Spark Society is a community of our most engaged Bridge graduates who unlock the benefits of continued access to Bridge tools and learning opportunities. So by joining the Bright Spark Society, you can get access to new courses on Lightful Academy, a regular newsletter that we send to our Bright Spark Society, and it contains the Bridge team's tips and advice. You'll also be able to keep in touch with the coaches, as well as a wider network of Bridge alumni in an exclusive WhatsApp group. And you'll also be the first to hear about our new digital tools. So many of the AI tools we've released this last year were tested by our Bright Sparks before they went live for our other users. So there are some steps to complete to be eligible to join the Bright Spark Society, which need to be done by the end of January. So I want to give you plenty of time to be able to take these steps. So the first one is to complete your impact survey. So this will be a survey that we'll be sharing with you all next week, and we'll be sending you reminders about this too. It just takes about 5 minutes, and it's a great opportunity to kind of reflect on what you've accomplished throughout the time on the Bridge programme, and also share any feedback you might have about the programme too. The second step is to create a campaign plan using our campaign planner. So that tool that I was just showing you a moment ago. And a final step is to have a final one-to-one. And I know some of you have already had one in the end of 2024, but if you haven't yet had your final one-to-one, do get those booked in. And we'll be sending you all the details about this over email, as well as all the links to make sure you can take those actions next week. So keep an eye on your inboxes for that. And I'm going to launch one final poll, I think, to get some feedback on how you are planning to use your analytics now. So let's get that live for you. Hopefully that's popped up on your screen, asking whether you plan to start making more use of your analytics after this session. Thank you. I can see you are all busy voting in that now. And shall we open up the floor to your questions now? So feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, or do pop them in the Q&A where you can type your questions. So has anybody got any questions they would like to ask? Perhaps while you're having a think about your questions, I'll read out Ali's, who she asked it in the Q&A earlier, but I think it's a great question. And she was saying, we had an email newsletter for years and it hasn't been segmented, where to start? And Svetlana has answered the question, but yes, knowing where to start with email segmentation can be quite daunting. Like Svetlana has advised, starting with the audience groups that you have, so your different segments or your personas is a great place to start. You can then even take it a little bit further by sending your existing audience perhaps a survey asking what they like to hear most from you. That could be really helpful when you're thinking about how to segment your email newsletters. Then the learnings that you get from those responses in the survey, you can even apply that to when you're having people sign up to your newsletters. So it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling cycle. So you can have options on your website at that point of sign up saying, what do we like to hear about the most? And they can tick that, and that will help you with your segmentation going forwards. Those are a couple of ideas, and do feel free to book a one-to-one and we can look at this in more detail too. Jalen, I can see you've got your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, hello, Sabina and Jasmine and everyone. Happy New Year. It's good to see all of you again. So I had a question about the campaign template. So for some of our campaigns, the majority of our campaigns, we don't have necessarily an end date because it's always ongoing. So how do I just, for the campaigns that are, again, 99% of our campaigns to different areas of the world regarding our disaster relief is just always ongoing. And so do I just check in monthly or weekly about the data points if I don't have an end date for my campaigns?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think for those ongoing campaigns, giving yourself a framework to work towards to check against your data points is what's going to be the most useful. And the timing is again going to be what's best for you. So if that is realistic to do on a weekly basis, then a quick check-in that frequently might be really useful for you, especially if you need to pivot the way that you're working. If that feels unrealistic, I think perhaps breaking it down to even quarterly would give you a chance to go back through the data in a lot more detail and perhaps use that to draw insights that you can apply going forward. So yeah, I think it's a tricky one, like you say, because you have got those ongoing campaigns and you're a small team, so you need to be flexible and work quickly. Jasmine, I don't know if you've got any more insights you want to add on this one.
Yeah, I think maybe differentiating between the data points that you're collecting. So I imagine some of it's kind of program related. So the ongoing programs that you're doing, it's like delivering the kits and supporting other individuals, and maybe the numbers on that are something that's ongoing. Maybe when it comes to kind of the events that you hold and the fundraising campaigns that you run, they'll be more time bound. So maybe it's splitting out those data points to say, actually, we're going to have, maybe it's a quarterly campaign for fundraising or for whatever it is that you're doing on that like external perspective. And then maybe, like Sabina said, it's monthly or quarterly reporting on your internal data of like that program data and like the delivery of what you're doing. Because like you say, that's just going to keep going, hopefully. And maybe when you've started doing that, maybe monthly, you might then set some goals in terms of, do you want to increase that perhaps, and looking at the metrics that way. Yeah, like Sabina said, definitely like picking a frequency that works so that it's sustainable, rather than feeling like you have to be all over all the data all the time, because when it's a small team, that just isn't always possible. So factoring that in, I think.
Thank you.
No worries.
Great question. Did anybody else have any questions they would like to ask? No worries. If not, we can keep an eye on the chat for any that get submitted. But if you do think of any questions after we wrap up today, do just drop us an email to support@lightful.com, and we are always happy to help. So I can see we have just launched our final poll for today with asking for a little bit of feedback about today's session. I'm going to pick Jasmine's brains here. Do you think we've got time for the end of session quiz?
I probably can't fit it into the last few seconds, so I think we can add that into the WhatsApp group afterwards. But I was just going to say, yeah, big thank you to everyone for coming to your first session back. I know it's quite a technical one to start the year off with, but we're going to be switching gears as we head into your final month on the programme, which officially starts next week. So that'll be your last month on Bridge, and next week we're going to be looking at how you can work with influencers and ambassadors at your penultimate session, which is taking place on Thursday, the 16th of January. So hopefully that'll be a really useful one. We fill it as much as we can with kind of practical tips for how you might work with ambassadors, influencers. And I know people are often quite surprised, I think, by the content that we share, because often influencers feels quite far-fetched and very distant to what we do, but hopefully we'll be able to talk to you about how you can engage with local ambassadors to help audience engagement. So yeah, a bit of a different session next week, but we'll look forward to seeing you all there next Thursday. So I think that's it from us. Like Sabina said, just drop us a message if you need any help. We'll be sending more information out about what happens as you come to the end of the programme, including that alumni information and qualification actions next week. So keep an eye out in your inboxes for that. Otherwise, a big thank you to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Great to see you.